I have often suspected that hope is far less a delicate flower than a suit of mail. The world prefers to dress it in soft colors, as if hope were a sentimental mood for peaceful afternoons and pleasant hymns. But anyone who has watched night advance on the soul knows better. Despair does not come like a loud army at the gate. It slips in like a fog, blunting edges, dimming distances, persuading us that there is nowhere worth walking to. Against such an enemy, tenderness is not enough. We require something shaped to fit the ribs, tempered to turn a blade, and bright enough to reflect a greater light when our own lamps grow low. Christian hope is not an escape from reality. It is a deeper plunge into it. It is the armor lent to pilgrims who must march through weather that would ruin mere optimism and yet arrive. When I speak of hope, I do not mean a cheerful temperament or a refusal to acknowledge the brokenness of things. The kind of hope that keeps vigil by a hospital bed or stands in the ruins after the fire is made of sterner stuff. Despair tells us that suffering is final, that guilt cannot be forgiven, that love is an illusion cleverly concealed in biology, and that death is the terminus rather than the threshold. Hope answers not with a slogan, but with a horizon. It insists that meaning precedes matter, that mercy is older than sin, and that our griefs, though heavy, are not sovereign. If despair is a narrowing, hope is a widening. It opens a window when the room is thick with breath and smoke, and the soul, starved of air, remembers the sky. Do not confuse hope with optimism. Optimism is a weather report drawn from appearances. Hope is the compass set by truth. Optimism is content while the sun shines. Hope, having once set its needle by the eternal, will walk by starlight and even through cloud, knowing there is a sun though hidden. Nor is hope mere stoicism, the grim clenching of teeth under a respectable mask. Stoicism may endure. Hope expects. It looks beyond the immediate ache toward a promised country not of our own making. The old writers spoke of an anchor within the veil, something fixed on the far side of the storm. One anchors a ship not to its deck, but to a seabed more stable than the vessel. So the soul, if it is to ride out real tempests, must be fastened to a reality more steadfast than its own sensations. How then is such armor fashioned? No knight ever found a breastplate growing wild in the hedgerows. Armor is forged. It is hammered into shape by practices that are humble and regular. Prayer that is honest rather than eloquent. Repentance that prefers truth to dignity. Thanksgiving that names small mercies, and obedience in those duties which the day quietly offers. Each act is a ring in the chainmail, trivial taken alone, nearly impenetrable when woven. We imagine great spiritual equipment descending upon us in a flash, but God, who is not a dealer in cheap enchantments, teaches us to put on hope by fastening it piece by piece, until the habit becomes our second nature. Imagination plays its part, for hope is the memory of the future. There is in us a homesickness that no landscape fully satisfies, a sweetness that music awakens and immediately withholds. These are not cruel tricks. They are postcards sent from our true country, assuring us that the banquet exists, though we have tasted only the fragrance from the kitchen. Despair calls such longings childish, but the appetite is a clue to the feast, not a refutation of it. No one invents hunger in a world without food. The very ache suggests a provision. Therefore, when beauty wounds us with joy, or fidelity startles us with its stubbornness, we may treat the pain as a map and the consolation as a signpost. Reason, too, must serve. If the universe is only accident, why does our conscience so obstinately refuse to behave as a byproduct? If love is only chemistry, why does it ask for sacrifice rather than survival? If evil is merely misfortune, why do we feel the sharp humiliation of guilt and the strange liberty of forgiveness? Hope does not despise these questions. It sharpens them, for it expects answers large enough to live by. Christian faith declares that history has already been invaded by its future, that the Maker has entered the scene. He wrote that death has been tasted and unseated, and that the tomb which once closed every story has been reopened into a door, to where hope is to dress oneself in that verdict ahead of time. Suffering then becomes not meaningless but meaningful under a different sovereignty. God is not a bureaucrat of pain, but a physician who will not flatter our disease. There is a severity in surgery and a mercy in the surgeon. We are not asked to admire the knife. We are asked to trust the hands that hold it. The pattern is given us once for all in wood and iron. The carpenter lifted upon his own timber. Hope stands there and learns its craft, not that we should love crosses for their own sake, but that we should love the one who turns them into ladders. Finally, remember that armor is best worn in company. Roman soldiers built their defense by locking shields. So the church advances. A solitary breastplate leaves the flanks exposed. Therefore join your hope to the hopes of others. Sing when you cannot pray. Borrow a candle from a neighbor when your wick is cold. Lend your shoulder to another's stretcher, and discover that you have been carried in turn. Despair isolates, hope congregates. It teaches us to keep feasts in a far country, to rehearse the joy that shall one day be our daily bread. Put it on, then, this bright and weighty thing. Fasten it in the morning before your news and your memories assault you. Polish it with gratitude at noon. Hang it by the bed at night, not as a relic of your courage, but as a promise of his. And when the fog returns, as it will step forward. Armor is not meant for display, but for marching. Hope, like all armor, is not without its weight. One must grow accustomed to carrying it. At first it feels awkward, as though one were overdressed for the occasion. But despair is a sharper burden, and once you have known its heaviness, you will find the yoke of hope strangely light. Imagine a traveler who insists on carrying a sack of stones, thinking them precious. When he discovers they are worthless rubble, the relief in casting them aside is joy indeed. So it is with hopelessness. We cling to it, mistaking its dark whispers for realism, until we see the folly of treating despair as truth. Then, slipping into hope, we realize that its apparent weight is, in fact, strength, something that does not crush but upholds. Now hope has enemies. Despair is the most obvious, but subtler foes often wear a mask of reasonableness. One is cynicism, the pose that says, I have seen too much to be deceived. Cynicism fancies itself wise, but it is only prematurely old, weary before its time. It blinds the eyes not to disappointment, but to wonder. Another foe is presumption, the counterfeit hope. Presumption does not trust God's promises. It demands them, twisting hope into entitlement. True hope kneels while presumption stamps its foot. Yet the greatest danger is forgetfulness, that creeping erosion of vision whereby eternity fades into the background and the soul lives as though there were nothing beyond tomorrow's errands. Forgetfulness is not a sword strike, but a slow rot, against which hope must continually be burnished. Consider, too, that hope is prophetic. It speaks of things not yet seen as though they were already unfolding. When Paul writes of the creation groaning, awaiting its redemption, he is teaching us to read present suffering not as meaningless noise, but as birth pangs. No mother mistakes the cry of labor for the cry of death. Pain can signify beginning as much as ending. And so, when the world groans under its calamities, disease, division, decay, the hopeful heart does not deny the anguish, but interprets it. Hope is a hermeneutic, a lens through which reality is deciphered according to the author's final chapter, not our current page. But here I must remind you, armor is not for those who stay at home. It is forged for those who go into battle. Hope will be tested not in cloisters of quiet, but on battlefields of loss, betrayal, fatigue, and the long silence of unanswered prayers. Yet the very testing is proof of its substance. A shield hung forever on the wall grows brittle. Only the blows of war teach its metal what it was made for. Do not despise the clash then, nor imagine yourself abandoned because the arrows fall thick. Rather, see in your perseverance the shining of the armor, as though each scar on its surface were a mark of survival, a testimony that despair has not triumphed. And what of the end? Armor implies a campaign, and campaigns imply a homecoming. The strange thing about hope is that it is both the armor for the journey and the fragrance of the destination. The scent of the banquet drifts upon the air long before the hall is reached. Pilgrims know the smell of bread before they taste it. Thus, when you feel joy stir unbidden in the midst of sorrow, do not dismiss it as illusion. It is the perfume of your true country, carried on a wind from the future, and to wear hope is to breathe deeply of that air, even while your feet are still caked with the dust of the road. Therefore, when you find yourself weary, remember this: hope is not an ornament for the strong, but a necessity for the weak. It is the very thing that allows us to rise after we have fallen, to believe after we have doubted, to love after we have been wounded. Without hope, faith loses its horizon and love loses its courage. With hope, both are fortified. For it is hope that whispers at the graveside, "This is not the end." It is hope that steadies the trembling hand at the hospital bed. It is hope that sings almost inaudibly when all other songs have ceased. So put it on daily, not because you are certain of yourself, but because you are certain of Him who clothes you. For the armor of hope is not hammered by human resolve, but gifted by divine grace. It is His light upon your breast, His strength in your stride, His promise in your heart. And if ever you feel it slipping, remember, it is not your grip upon hope that secures you, but hope's grip upon you. You because it is Christ Himself who has wrapped you in it. Hope, if you trace its lineage, is a child of memory and promise. Memory recalls what God has already done. Promise declares what He will yet accomplish. Between these two pillars, the bridge of hope is suspended. Without memory, the soul forgets the parted seas, the daily manna, the times it was delivered from snares invisible until afterwards. Without promise, the soul shrivels into nostalgia, staring backward but never forward. Yet when both meet, when recollection shakes hands with expectation, then hope is not a flimsy wish, but a robust certainty wearing steel upon its shoulders. Think of Israel in the wilderness. Their memory was of slavery's chains. Their promise was of a land flowing with milk and honey. The desert lay between, a place both barren and bewildering. In such landscapes, despair mutters, "We were better off in Egypt." But hope answers, "The God who opened the sea shall also open the future." So with us. We are pilgrims caught between memory and promise, armed not with wishful thinking, but with trust that the God who has begun His work will not abandon it halfway. There is, too, an aesthetic quality to hope. It beautifies the soul. Despair corrodes. It shrinks the face inward until the eyes dim and the voice falters. But hope casts light forward and outward, like a candle behind stained glass, coloring the countenance with gentleness. Even in old age, when the body trembles, hope lends a youthful gaze, for it peers not into the grave but through it. That is why saints on their deathbeds often look strangely radiant, as if already lit from another sun. Their armor is nearly complete. They have fought, and hope shines on them as the first glimmer of victory. We must not mistake, however, that this armor is purely defensive. Hope not only resists despair, but advances against it. It marches into prisons with Paul, who sings hymns at midnight. It ascends Golgotha with Christ, who endured the cross for the joy set before Him. Hope is missionary, not sedentary. It dares to plant gardens in ruins, to teach children in slums, to build cathedrals while empires totter. The world may call such labor foolish, but hope knows that no cup of cold water is wasted, no act of faith forgotten, for the King is returning and shall weigh every tear and treasure alike. And so I say again, Treat hope as your daily mail, not your Sunday best. Fasten it as you rise, polish it in prayer, let it clang as you walk, and never be ashamed of its weight. Others may laugh, preferring lighter garb, but when the fog thickens and the arrows fall, you shall discover that this burden is in fact your salvation. For in the end, the armor of hope is not finally about us at all. It is about Him, the Lord, who girds His people, who Himself is our shield and exceedingly great reward. To wear hope is to wear Christ, to be clothed in His victory, even while we wait for its consummation. Hope is a paradoxical thing. It is both profoundly inward and radically outward. Inward because it roots itself in the secret chambers of the heart, unseen by those who measure only appearances. Outward because it constantly leans forward, stretching toward a horizon not yet possessed. A man without hope collapses into himself like a house whose walls cave inward. But the hopeful soul is always leaning, always listening for a distant music. It is like a bird caged in twilight, already rehearsing its dawn song before the sky has lightened. Now let us consider how hope transfigures suffering. Many imagine that hope denies pain as though it were a painted smile upon a grieving face. This is not so. Rather, hope intensifies the pain by admitting it fully, but then reinterprets it. A wound in despair festers into bitterness. The same wound under hope becomes an opening through which divine light enters. Suffering without hope is a locked room. Suffering with hope is a threshold. Even the tears of the faithful are gathered, not wasted. Scripture tells us they are bottled, treasured as seeds that shall one day bloom into joy. Hope also guards against the poison of envy. Despair whispers, "Others prosper while you languish." Hope replies, "Their joy is a foretaste of what is promised to us all." Thus, hope transforms comparison into communion. The success of another becomes not a threat, but an encouragement, a reminder that the kingdom is generous, not scarce. In this way, hope shields us from self-pity, which corrodes gratitude, and instead clothes us with a magnanimity that rejoices in the good wherever it appears. We must not overlook the eschatological heart of hope. It is, in truth, the anticipation of a world remade. Our present labors, our incomplete loves, our fractured attempts at justice all are fragments pointing toward wholeness. The resurrection of Christ is not merely a private consolation. It is the pledge that all creation shall be renewed. Hope, therefore, stretches beyond individual destiny. It defends against cosmic despair. For when the earth quakes, when nations rage, when the headlines are filled with decay, hope anchors us in a certainty deeper than any catastrophe. We know the author, and he has promised not merely an ending, but a beginning. And see how hope nourishes the imagination. Without it, imagination collapses into nightmare, creating only apocalypses of ruin. With it, imagination becomes a herald, sketching faint outlines of a new Jerusalem where every tear is wiped away. Thus, artists, poets, and preachers all alike become servants of hope, offering glimpses of a city not built by hands, but descending from heaven. And every true act of creativity is, in its essence, a rebellion against despair, a declaration that the story is not finished. Therefore, let us wear the armor bravely, for though it gleams, it is not fragile. Though it shines, it is not decorative. It was forged in the fire of the cross and tempered in the empty tomb. It is not an heirloom for display, but a weapon for the march. And in the end, when hope gives way to sight, the armor shall be transformed into festal robes, and the weary soldier shall become a guest at the wedding feast. One of the most striking things about hope is that it belongs not only to the present, but to eternity. Faith anchors us to God's promises. Love binds us to God Himself and to our neighbor, but hope is the bridge between this hour and the endless ages. It is like the dawn, which is both night's end and day's beginning. When we wear the armor of hope, we are already clothed in a fragment of the future. We walk through time carrying eternity upon our shoulders. Notice also how hope humbles us. Despair often masquerades as self-importance. My troubles are unique, my failures final, my sorrows ultimate. But hope looks upward and outward. It teaches us that our story is enfolded in a larger story, that our wounds are not singular but part of the world's long groaning, and that our healing is bound up in the same redemption that shall heal creation itself. Thus, hope cures the arrogance of despair by reminding us that we are not the center of the universe, but beloved participants in a far grander tale. And here is a further mystery. Hope thrives in weakness. When we are strong, we scarcely think we need it, but when our hands tremble, when our words falter, when our strength fails, then hope shines brightest. The apostles' words are no mere rhetoric. When I am weak, then am I strong. The armor of hope is not fashioned to fit the proud warrior striding confidently into battle. It is tailored for the limping pilgrim who knows he cannot stand alone. God does not despise the faltering soldier, for his own son fell under the weight of his cross, and in that very falling carried the world. Hope is also communal by its nature. A solitary flame may sputter in the wind, but 1,000 flames together create a blaze no storm can quench. So it is with hope. When you cannot lift your head, another song may raise it for you. When your armor seems too heavy, the church surrounds you with its shields. To share in worship, in fellowship, in service, is to participate in a great armory where hope is mended, polished, and passed from hand to hand. Despair isolates, whispering, "You are alone." Hope gathers, declaring, "You are one among many, and the captain of your salvation leads you still." Let us not forget that hope is not wishful thinking, but disciplined expectation. The farmer who sows seeds in the dark soil is a picture of it. He does not plant because the earth looks promising that morning. He plants because he trusts the season, the rain, and the sun that shall come. So with us. We plant prayers, we plant acts of kindness, we plant faithfulness into the day's ordinary soil, believing that God will bring a harvest beyond our sight. To live in hope is to live as a sower, trusting the invisible processes of grace, content to wait for the reaping. And yet there will come a moment when waiting shall cease. Hope shall be consummated in vision. The armor will be laid aside, not because it has failed, but because battle will be no more. What is now promise will be presence. What is now longing will be fulfillment. The great paradox of hope is that it ends in joy by ending itself, as a lamp is extinguished not in darkness, but in sunrise. So long as we are here, we must wear it faithfully, for without it, despair would pierce us easily. But beyond, at the threshold of eternity, we shall discover that the armor of hope has done its work. It has carried us home. Hope, if we attend carefully, is never content to remain an ornament of private devotion. It demands expression, action, embodiment. A soldier who wears armor but never joins the march is a contradiction in terms. Likewise, the soul who speaks of hope but never lets it guide choices has mistaken the armor for decoration. True hope bends the will, redirects the affections, reshapes the habits of each day. It bids us forgive when we would rather remember wrongs because we know a judge more merciful than ourselves. It teaches us generosity even when scarcity frightens us because we trust in a treasure that moth and rust cannot touch. It instructs us to endure quietly in obscurity because the one who sees in secret is not blind. Consider how this distinguishes hope from mere wish. A wish is weightless. It neither shields nor propels. But hope, forged in the certainty of God's character, is a kind of moral gravity. It pulls us toward righteousness. It steadies the hand when tempted to revenge, for it knows justice is not ours to perfect. It steadies the tongue when tempted to despairing words, for it knows the final word is not yet spoken. Indeed, hope lends to every act of fidelity a quiet courage, for it assures us that nothing is wasted in the kingdom of God. Another thing, hope sharpens vision. Despair blinds us to possibilities. It paints the world in grays, convincing us that no good can come. But hope restores color. It sees mercy even in small kindnesses, sees redemption even in broken stories, sees resurrection shimmering faintly beneath the soil of death. Thus the hopeful are not naive dreamers, but realists of the highest order. They see not only what is, but what shall be under the hand of God. They look upon graves and already discern gardens. They stand before ruins and already hear the sound of rebuilding. Hope also enlarges love, for without hope love withers into possessiveness or despair. If we believed all relationships ended finally in death, our loves would shrink into desperate clinging or cold detachment. But hope declares that love is not wasted, that every pure affection is caught up into eternity. Therefore we may love freely without fear of loss, because in Christ no good thing is ever truly lost. To wear the armor of hope is to guard the heart, so that love may flow without panic. It is, in a sense, a protection for charity itself. And what of death, the last and sharpest arrow? Here hope is most luminous, for despair sees only the closing of eyes, the silencing of voices, the fading of touch. Hope sees beyond. It sees the door swinging open into light, the voice calling from the shore, the table already set. Hope does not deny the bitterness of farewell, but it refuses to call it final. Death, once a tyrant, is now reduced to a servant, ushering the faithful into joy. And so the armor of hope does not merely defend against despair. In life, it defends against despair in dying. Remember then, hope is not the luxury of the comfortable, but the necessity of the weary. It is not a cushion for the sentimental, but a shield for the embattled. It is given, not earned, bestowed, not manufactured, and it will hold because its strength is not in our frail grasp, but in the everlasting arms of the one who has promised. The armor of hope, if you wear it faithfully, will sometimes make you appear strange to the world. For despair is regarded as sophistication and cynicism as maturity, while hope is often mistaken for naivete. Yet the true knave are those who think history is without author, who imagine love is an accident, who treat death as ultimate. It is not childish to expect the sunrise. It is childish to insist the night will last forever. Thus the hopeful may be mocked, but they walk with the steady tread of those who know where the road leads. Indeed, hope grants a strange courage, for if despair paralyzes and fear imprisons, hope liberates. A man armed with hope can venture into the most desolate of places, into hospitals, prisons, and slums, without being swallowed by darkness. He is not blind to suffering, but he refuses to grant suffering the last word. Hope equips him to bring light, however small, into caverns that would otherwise suffocate. And this is why saints have always seemed reckless to the cautious. They dared to live as though heaven were already breaking in. Hope also alters time itself, for despair compresses time into a crushing present, where past failures and future anxieties converge into one weight. But hope stretches time open. It redeems the past by recalling forgiveness. It sanctifies the present by giving it purpose. It secures the future by filling it with promise. Thus the hopeful do not need to hoard days, for they know eternity waits. They do not need to curse yesterday, for they know grace has entered it. And they do not need to dread tomorrow, for they know the author is already there. There is also this: hope is deeply subversive. Tyrants despise it, for despair is their ally. A hopeless people is easily ruled, for they no longer imagine freedom. But a hopeful people cannot be crushed, for even in chains they see a kingdom coming. Hope whispers to the prisoner that the walls are temporary, to the oppressed that justice is not forgotten, to the mourner that comfort is near. It unsettles the powers of this world precisely because it anchors itself in a power they cannot touch. The early Christians baffled Rome not by swords, but by hope, the kind that sang in catacombs and prayed in arenas, the kind that made martyrs die with hymns upon their lips. Finally, let us confess, hope is not always felt. It is sometimes an armor worn in obedience rather than in emotion. There will be days when despair presses so closely that hope seems hollow. On those days, wear it anyway. Fasten it as one fastens a cloak in rain, not because the sun is shining, but because the storm is real. God has not commanded us to feel hopeful at every hour, but to cling to the hope that clings to us. For in the end, the armor does not rest upon our frailty. It rests upon the strength of Christ, who has overcome the world. And so, beloved, put on the armor of hope, not lightly, not occasionally, but daily. For in this world you will have tribulation, yet clothed in hope you shall not be overcome. If I may speak plainly, I believe hope is the quiet miracle by which the soul survives its darkest nights. We cannot live without food, nor without air, and I suspect we cannot live truly without hope. Despair corrodes more swiftly than hunger, and it withers more ruthlessly than thirst. But hope is the invisible breath of eternity filling our lungs. To wear it is to remember that our story is neither random nor ruined, but already inscribed in the mercy of God. Think of the armor once more. A breastplate is not put on for leisure, but for battle. And this battle is not fought only on grand stages, but in the secret places. When we choose forgiveness over resentment, when we pray though heaven seems silent, when we rise in the morning and bless God though grief still lingers. Each of these small obediences is a victory of hope over despair, a shining link in the chainmail of faith. Do not imagine that your struggles make you unworthy of hope. Quite the opposite, they are the very places where hope proves its strength. A soldier with no enemy does not need armor. It is the one facing assault who discovers its necessity. If you feel assaulted by doubt, by loss, by the heavy fog of futility, then know this: you are precisely the one for whom hope was given. For Christ himself descended into our midnight, not to abolish suffering in an instant, but to walk with us through it, and to turn the grave into a gateway. And now, as we look forward, let us remember that hope does not end in itself. Its task is to carry us until the day when faith becomes sight and promises become presence. Then hope will be fulfilled, like a lamp extinguished in the sunrise. But until that hour, we must wear it faithfully, fastening it each morning, polishing it with thanksgiving, guarding it in fellowship, and entrusting it in prayer. For hope is not an escape from reality, but the truest vision of it. It is not fragile glass, but tempered steel. It does not ask us to deny our tears, but to believe they shall be wiped away. It does not demand that we ignore the grave, but that we look beyond it. And it does not leave us lonely, for the same Christ who gives us hope also walks beside us until the end of the age. So let me leave you with this: clothe yourself daily in the armor of hope. Let it shield your mind against despair, guard your heart against cynicism, and steady your steps against fear. For the one who has promised is faithful, and his word will not fail. In him, despair has no dominion, and the last chapter is already written in glory. Thank you for joining me in this reflection. If these words have strengthened you, I would invite you to like this message, share it with others who may need its comfort, and subscribe for more such meditations. May the armor of hope be your daily strength until faith becomes sight and love becomes all in all.